Hey Emma,
Yes, Madelyn.
where do terrestrial invertebrates that belong to the phylum Annelida go to work out?
I don't know.
The Earthworm Jim! Hello, and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I know a lot about the classification of earthworms host, Madelyn.
I don't know that host, Emma.
I didn't know it until about 10 seconds ago either. And welcome to the show. This week, we've got the incredible pairing of games, Earthworm Jim and Deathloop. I was thinking about the mashup a little bit in advance, as I sometimes do, and I was like, it's Worms Armageddon. And that's a shame.
Yeah. You know, there's something to be like worms coming out of the ground, like a symbol of rebirth.
Is that a symbol of rebirth?
Like, when something dead goes into the ground and spreads its nutrients and then the worms come back up.
Don't the worms come out when it rains and they're drowning underground? Can worms drown? Is that the term?
Don't they get, life from the dirt, though? I don't know what worms eat.
It's a symbol of rebirth.
Yes.
So those are the games. So, shall we get groovy? That was pretty bad. That was not a good one.
Yeah, I think before we start talking about Earthworm Jim, as a game, I do think it's best to start with, the downer that...
Yeah. He's a bad man.
Yeah, so the original creator of Earthworm Jim is Doug TenNapel.
Mm-hmm.
And he's an awful guy. He's homophobic, he's transphobic, he's a Trump supporter. He uses phrases like culture war with complete sincerity. And it's just generally a huge piece of garbage. So it's probably good you didn't play this game.
Yeah, probably better not to have. I did try, there was an emulated version online that I attempted to play, but I was trying to do it in an airport, and I couldn't figure out how to aim my gun not in the cardinal directions, so I gave up pretty quickly. But I did watch a full playthrough of a full playthrough, not counting the many, 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 many times you would probably die and where you would give up on the game somewhere about 2/3 of the way through.
Yeah.
But a full playthrough of the game. So I feel like that counts in my, once again, neither of these games are on systems that I can access. But yes, bad man. I think he's working on the coming out someday for a system that's coming out someday game.
Whether that exists or not.
Right. Assuming that exists, which is a stretch. I'm not sure how involved he is in the new animated series that is coming.
Probably good to look that up before you watch it. And if that ever does come out, even though we're talking about Earthworm Jim, maybe just you don't need it. You don't need a new Earthworm Jim, maybe. In this case.
It's not coming to a system that you will have, is what I'll say.
The Stadia?
Maybe it's coming to the Stadia, you're right. If it comes to Stadia, I'll eat my words. So, with that bummer aside, Earthworm Jim is a side-scrolling run-and-gun platformer starring, you guessed it, an earthworm named Jim in a robot suit.
Yeah.
It was developed by Shiny Entertainment. The original one came out in 1994 for the Sega Genesis, and then it went to the Super Nintendo, and was eventually ported to PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 and phones DS. To which you might be saying, Madelyn, you lazy worm, you have a PlayStation 3, you have a cell phone, why didn't you play this game? Well, it's not available anymore. The publisher or developer or something, they're agreement ran out. So it's not just that I didn't want to boot up my PS3, it's that it is no longer available.
Specifically, Earthworm Jim came about because Playdate's Toys, who were selling, who had the license for like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle toys, and were selling a lot and doing very well there. Just were like, we want to start our own franchise and not do licensed stuff. We want to create our own character and sell stuff around that. And apparently because Sonic was so popular, specifically, they're like, let's start with a video game. And they ended up working together with Shiny on that.
And Earthworm Jim was born.
Yep.
So there's 4 Earthworm Jim games, if you don't count all of the remasters. There's Earthworm Jim, there's Earthworm Jim 2, there's Earthworm Jim 3D, and there's Earthworm Jim Menace to the Galaxy, which you would think would be the second game, but is the 4th game.
Yeah.
And theoretically, there's Earthworm Jim 4, which is confusing, because there are already 4, but Earthworm Jim 4 that is maybe in development for the Intellivision Amico system, but that system is still in development, so who knows? So Earthworm Jim has not had a new game in the past, 15 years. It's another one of these series that it's like, oh, they had semi-regular games. It was funny to me reading about 3D. It was like, the incredibly long development process made people think it was vaporware because it took them 3 years.
Yeah. That is really funny. But it's true, right?
Yeah.
Like, we've talked about these sort of older series at the time. It's like they released them every year for a few years, and then it's been a really long time since any other ones came out. And it's like, yeah, I guess that's just how you expected to get games back then, is like it only took them like a year to do it, each installment of the series.
Well, I also read a review of the second one, so the first one came out in 1994, the second one came out in 1995, that was like the long-awaited sequel. It's like, how is that possible?
I don't know.
Anyway, in Earthworm Jim, you are the Earthworm Jim.
Yes.
Despite my joke, it is not about working out. It's about you're an earthworm named Jim. You do not live on Earth. Earth is like a myth. Like, it's where Jim thinks he comes from in this. So you're just like a worm in these alien worlds. And when you get this robot suit, everybody wants the robot suit back from you. So you've made a lot of enemies. And also, in a spoof, I guess, everything is like, it's a parody. I'm like, it's pretty weak to be too much of a parody here, but I guess that's the level of what parodying a game in the mid-90s looks like, so whatever. But it's like, oh, you overhear that Princess What's-Her-Name has been captured, and so you have to save her. So just like Mario, right? Except she doesn't have a name.
No, that is her name.
Well, yes, that is her name. Sorry. I mean, you know what I mean.
Just to the type of satire, it's not just like he doesn't know her name.
Right.
That's her name. Her name is What's Her Name. And to be fair, all of the characters have names that are like this.
Yes. Slug for a butt.
Yes. Professor Monkey for a head.
So that's the kind of satire we're talking about. I'll let you judge if this is mad funny. The reviewers at the time seemed to think it was mad funny.
It's just like, it's very everything.
Yeah.
It's like they threw a bunch of stuff and stuck it in a wide spread, so it comes off as kind of chaotic in a way that I feel like maybe was newish for video games at the time.
Well, supposedly that came out of Shiny Entertainment's history as they developed the 7-Up game, right? As a game company for hire. And so when they finally got to make something where they didn't have 7-Up telling them what to do, they were just like, yeah, he's a worm. And he battles a booger and a butt. Like, sure.
He makes friends with the booger, though. Unless it's a different booger.
I think the friendly booger is game 2.
Yes, I just mean later on. He is friends with the booger.
Yes, after their bungee jumping battle. Anyway, we'll talk about that. In most levels, what you do is you've got a gun, because you're a robot suit, and you can also use your worm head as a whip.
Yes.
Right? So you are, like, fun fact, this is what what Spielberg wanted Indiana Jones to be. And then they said, Steve, the graphical technology is not there. Harrison Ford won't do it. So, the true vision, the true Spielbergian vision of Indiana Jones is as a worm who whips his own head. So you can use that as a weapon. You could also use it to, swing around through the level. And so you're platforming around and you're shooting stuff. And there's some variations of things that happens in levels, but those are the basics. So, if you wanted an amazing amount of worms with guns content in the video game canon, to be honest.
More than you'd expect, yeah.
Like, is there any other genre or any other medium that can claim this much worms with guns content?
To be honest, I can't think of another medium that has worms with guns content.
Correct us if we're wrong, folks. Is there an opera out there?
I hope so.
Well, anyway, so this game came out, right, for the Sega Genesis. It was weird to me to read about all these, like, they had this level in this version, but not in this version, and the bonus level in that version, but not in this version.
Yes, that's another thing that has sort of gone by the wayside, especially with, I did Earthworm Jim was never on portable systems, but I know a lot of games that got ported to, like, had, like, the GBA version that was, like, greatly simplified.
Well, I don't know if the original was ever on GBA. It may have been, actually. Because I think there was at least one of the games had a GBA port that had a color exclusive.
Oh, maybe you're right. Yeah. But yeah, like, because that, I assume the systems had different capabilities, especially going to like a GBA from a console thing. But yeah, there definitely used to be games that had different stuff going on for different versions, which just isn't the case anymore.
I just think about how mad everyone was about Spider-Man in the Marvel game.
Oh, right, only on Sony.
Yeah. It's like, imagine having a whole level. Do you think that'll come back? Do you think, as it's like it's a timed exclusive, but also you get access to only this level? Probably not.
There are exclusive pre-order bonuses. Everything
Sure.
gets its own exclusive pre-order bonus, but there are games that have, like, if you get it on PlayStation, you get this. If you get it on Xbox, you get this.
I know, but is the next frontier of the console wars to go back to, here's the PlayStation exclusive level?
Maybe. I don't know.
Could be. I did think the bonus level story about this was funny. So, like, it does have a bonus level on the Genesis that is not on the SNES, right? And the original story about that was that, like, there just wasn't enough space on the Super Nintendo version, which is, of course, just, like, not an argument you could ever make today, right?
Yes.
Because games can be just as big as you want them to be. But then
the game developers should work on optimizing a little bit.
That's been your weekly PSA. But then there are also some stories that it wasn't actually about space, but it was instead that Sega was like, we'll give you a discount on the cartridges if you give us something that's, like, just on ours. And so they made the story is that they made the level, like, the day it was due. Like, the day the cartridges were going to go out.
Wow.
They designed the level, and they play tested it, and they put it in.
To be honest, I'd sort of believe that. I mean, I wouldn't, state it as gospel without proof, but it does certainly seem like Sega would do something to try to, distinguish. It's like Mortal Kombat, sort of, only a little bit different.
Just like Mortal Kombat.
The blood, I mean.
Yeah, no, I know. I also want to talk about the TV commercial. Did you read about this?
No, I did not. Tell me about the TV commercial.
So the Genesis release, the original release, they promoted it with a commercial on television, right? Mm-hmm. I guess I don't have televisions, but I would like more game commercials in my Hulu. or I guess in the ad-supported Netflix that's coming soon. Whenever Netflix, I shouldn't put this out into the airwaves. Netflix is probably listening. Whenever Netflix discovers whether or not I am part of the household wherein I get my Netflix from, could I am. But if that were ever to change and I could go to ad-supported Netflix, give me some game trailers. I want some dumb game trailers. And not like the horrible mobile ones that are on like Funimation.
There's ad-supported Netflix?
They're talking about doing this.
Oh, okay.
They're bleeding money, Emma. Stranger Things bankrupted them.
I'm sure.
They have to be able to pay out the Squid Game the game winnings.
Oh,
money's
my God.
Gotta come from somewhere.
It's true, they gotta come from somewhere.
Anyway. So to promote the game, they had a commercial where there's this old woman, and, you know, she's telling like a bedtime story about Earthworm Jim. Not so bad, right?
Sure.
Except that she is eating live worms while she's doing it.
Sure.
Now, Wikipedia was careful to note that these were actually plastic props.
Good.
Not actually live worms, probably as required by the Screen Actors Guild.
Yes.
However,
well, would that have been around in the 90s? I don't really know the history of the Screen Actors Guild.
Screen Actors Guild, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
They would have had rules for not eating live worms in the 90s?
They probably have a specific contract clause in every contract. Like, you're like, yes, I'll pay the actors, I'll do the health and pension percentage, right? Like, safety on set, the no earthworms clause, breaks, meals. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Meals cannot be earthworms. Yeah. But yeah, they got a bunch of complaints and had to, like, pull it in a lot of places because people were grossed out.
That sounds like a very tame, like, Super Bowl ad to me, to be perfectly honest. Maybe it was freaky. Maybe it was really scary. Who knows?
Like an old woman eating worms.
Yeah. Or maybe, like, the kids were like, she's eating Earthworm Jim. And they were like, that's scary. I don't want to get it and see Earthworm Jim, my cool, groovy earthworm friend, be eaten by an old lady.
I can't quite get it. It goes a little too... I can't quite get the amount of, like, vocal fry of the, like... You know, coming out of the Genesis.
I'm not even going to try.
So. No, it's like too high.
That was too high. Yeah.
Groovy. Okay, I'm sorry, listeners. I'll stop. I'll practice on my own time. So yeah. There, as I mentioned, there was also an animated series that ran for 2 seasons in 1995 and 1996. That seemed like it had some, like, amusing elements to it, even though I'm sure it was not actually as amusing as it sounds. But, like, the idea, like, it had a cold open with Jim and Peter Puppy, who is an escort quest in the original game, but then becomes his pal in the TV show. Where it's like, oh, they're stuck in some kind of random situation and they have to get themselves out of it. And a middle break where it's like the villains applying for jobs. And then everyone getting crushed by a cow at the end. Which, spoiler alert, is the end of the original game.
Yeah. For whatever reason.
Well, he throws a cow out at the beginning. And then the cow comes, you know, Chekhov's cow.
Right.
Jim's cow.
Right.
So, you know, they had a sequel. Sequel was also well received. A lot of people thought the sequel was better than the first game, from what I could see. But the first game is really hard. I'm sure the sequel is too. But it's one of those games where it's just like, you know, watching the playthrough didn't really capture this for me because, of course, the person in the playthrough died like twice in the entire run. But definitely it seems like, oh, like you really have to know exactly where to go and how to shoot and what you're doing.
Yeah. The second game just was like, here's Earthworm Jim, and we've added like 5 new gameplay styles for certain levels.
Yeah.
Like added a lot of variety to the formula is my impression of what improved from one to the other.
I was impressed by the amount of like little bits of variety even in the original that I saw. Like like we mentioned earlier, there's one level where you are bungee jumping. So like you have a thing and then at the end like you kind of like stretch your little worm down. But you're bungee jumping with a booger. And you have to, like, attack the booger into the wall while you're both, like, bungee jumping down. This sounds gross, but I was impressed by the, like, oh, it's not just a platformer. Like, this is a fun twist. They also have the requisite, like, underwater vehicle thing, of course. Plus, levels called Andy's Asteroids after each boss, where you're, like, racing a dude. Really a missed opportunity to not... You're, like, going between planets. And not referring to those as wormholes feels like... Just proved to me this team could not have been very smart.
Yeah, true.
Because I had just had that revelation as I was watching it. I was like, oh, it's a wormhole. I didn't even remember the name of the level. And then I was like, wait a minute. No one ever calls this a wormhole? What the heck?
And then there, as we mentioned before, there was the long, arduous 3-year development cycle, where it was given to a different team of developers. I don't remember what they were called.
The game wasn't good, so maybe better not to name them.
Shiny was bought by Interplay, and the franchise was given to VIS Entertainment, who then decided, because a lot of platform game series were doing this, that they would go from 2D to 3D. And then people didn't like it.
And then they made another one for the DS, right? Or maybe the Game Boy.
Another team,
yeah,
David A. Palmer Productions, made Earthworm Jim Menace to the Gallery. That pretty much just turned it into like a collectathon thing, without much of like the randomness or charm or uniqueness.
And then they suffered from Atari's collapse.
Yes.
Right. The next game was supposed to be on the PSP, and seems to have been like mostly finished, or at least well on its way there. But then Atari like ran out of money for anything and sold everything off, and it never came out.
Yes.
And now maybe they're making a new one, but unknown.
To be honest, they shouldn't.
It does not feel like something that people would want, no.
Yeah.
Just given that it's a sort of frustrating platformer. There are just a lot of platformers that...
Well, I mean, that's a symptom of it just being old, the frustration element.
Right,
There's plenty of platformers that have become modernized. Just,
you're right.
I don't think the world needs any more Earthworm Jim, especially made by Doug TenNapel.
It doesn't have a lot to hang on. It's like, what is it going to do that it hasn't already done? Feels like they would be better served, and whatever. Not that this person deserves to be better served, but, seems like that it would be better served just being like, let's actually get a remastered version in the PlayStation Store. Rather than making a new game that will probably be bad.
Yeah.
I do have to... Well, do you have anything else to say about Earthworm Jim?
No. Go ahead.
To close by saying that the character of Earthworm Jim has apparently been recognized as one of the greatest animal protagonists in video game history.
By who?
Unclear.
Does it just say that on the Wikipedia page or something?
Yeah, links to something, but just,
maybe by Wikipedia.
Like, Wikipedia is the authority on the greatest game things. I will also say the music is kind of bopping.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, this is a bop.
It's IGN, by the way.
IGN says he's the greatest video game animal.
He's on the list of essential games for the animal within.
I don't want a worm within. You should see a doctor. Animal protagonists are kind of out, huh?
Yeah, we don't like those anymore. We want realism. There's still Ratchet and Clank. They're holding up the old guard.
Ratchet and Clank are only sort of animals, though.
What do you mean they're only sort of animals?
Well, Clank is not an animal.
Sure.
And Ratchet,
Do you think the characters in Zootopia are only sort of animals?
Oh my god. I just mean that Ratchet is like a space animal. And I know that Earthworm Jim is that too. I'm just... They're only half
I think you're
animal.
being a little bit too pedantic about this whole animal thing.
Fair enough. I would like to see a revival of weird animal protags. Give me a cockroach. Give me an axolotl. Give me a wombat. I think there are good action-adventure games to be made.
Yeah.
So, speaking of, well, it's not an action-adventure. You could have an animal FPS, too, I guess.
I'm pretty sure it was in the action-adventure category at the Game Awards.
Literally anything could be in the action-adventure category at the Game Awards.
Actually, it was just action game. Never mind.
Well, speaking of action and adventure, let's talk about Deathloop. Man, Deathloop almost tricked me into being interested in it again. And then I remembered.
What?
I was like, oh, this game looks interesting. This game looks fun. And then I was like, oh, right. I remember why people were, like, not all in on this game.
Oh, yeah. I guess slight spoilers for Deathloop, since I imagine we'll mention this plot element.
Let's talk about the not that stuff, and we'll save that for closer to the end.
Alright. Deathloop is a first-person shooter developed by Arcane Lyon, specifically. It's opposed to, I think they have one in Texas, is the other one. I don't remember what city, though.
Arcane y'all.
No.
Just kidding.
Maybe Austin? Whatever. This one's from France. So you take on the role of Colt, who is an assassin who's been stuck in a time loop, and has to take out 8 targets on this, like, enclosed island before midnight, in the hopes of closing the loop. So if he doesn't take out all 8 before midnight, or if he dies twice before taking them all out.
Each time period, right?
Is
it twice in each run, or is it whatever? Yeah.
I think it's twice in each run.
Okay.
I think. But he resets back to the start of the loop. So it's pretty similar to stuff like Dishonored in Prey, which is Arcane's other work in terms of the first-person shooter and the different sort of mechanics, but it adds like the roguelite elements. There's a lot more permanent upgrades than a typical roguelike, but theoretically your progress resets every time you die. So you can either, you can use gadgets or stealth or go headlong in to take out guards and try to learn information to help you figure out how to kill these 8 people most efficiently.
Yeah, IGN describes it as more of a Metroidvania than a roguelike, which was interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because there is eventually a lot of opportunity to kind of carry things over and not totally reset from run to run. Not that, of course, there are, as Emma said, roguelites that do that too. But it was interesting to me of like, oh, okay, like usually you think of time loop games very much as these roguelike or roguelite situations. And this one, because of some like elements of how the time loop is crafted, does turn out to be much more of like, you're kind of like exploring different branches. Yeah.
Yeah, like the key of a Metroidvania, as far as I understand at least, in case you didn't know and are just like, those words, is like you go through, you get new gadgets and abilities, and then you can return to a previous place on the map and get places that you couldn't get before because you didn't have these abilities.
Yeah.
So that makes sense to me, is like you go to certain locations, you gain sort of information and new skills, you can go back to an old location and be able to use that to affect different changes upon that environment. So that does make sense to call it that.
Yeah. I was just like, oh man, that's like an insightful insightful description from IGN. I appreciated that. Anyway, one of the things that makes this a little bit different, like if you're thinking time loop and you're thinking like Outer Wilds, or you're thinking 12 Minutes, which we talked about last month, right? Yeah. Or, Returnal that we talked about on the last episode, our last main episode anyway. All of those games happen in real time, right? So, like, as your run is going, and this is less critical in Returnal, obviously, than the other two, because it's not like a fixed amount of time. But in Outer Wilds and in 12 Minutes, it's like you have this amount of time before the, thing ends, or before the sun explodes, or that kind of thing. But in Deathloop, which just surprised me, I despite the fact that I feel like there was so much pre-release advertising for this game, I remember...
See, I want to talk about that, because I don't fully understand where that perception came from.
Maybe it was just that it was like, it stuck in my head because it was pretty good pre-release advertising, but I just felt like I was quite aware of Deathloop.
I think maybe it's a symptom of, I think it started advertising when, was this the year that, like, Summer of Games was getting, like, Jeff Keighley's E3?
Yeah.
So it might just be, it would happen to be at a few different shows, and because it's not E3 anymore, that was, like, spread through the whole summer, that people were paying attention to, like, way more game shows than they game previews than they previously had, and so it felt like it was advertised a lot. Because I remember seeing, like, 3, maybe 4 trailers, which, I don't know, that's a normal amount of trailers for a game, to be perfectly honest.
No, it is. I think what I'm responding to is, I don't watch, like, every single one of these game show things. And it did feel like Deathloop was in almost all the ones.
No, I mean, it's not just you. It was, like, a widely perception that there was a lot of marketing for it, and I did not fully understand where that perception came from.
I also think there was one that I watched in that summer where it got one of the really long spots, which is fine, right? Like, it's a showy PS5 exclusive. Like, it's not that it didn't deserve one of those long spots. But, and I can't remember this clearly enough, but it might have been in a show where people were, like, expecting, other, like, Final Fantasy news or, like, whatever. And instead you got, like, 20 minutes of Deathloop after having already seen. Anyway, I don't think it was an unreasonable amount of promo. I just remember feeling like, oh, I saw a lot of this. Heard that song a lot. The Bond song
maybe it was the catchy song. That might have been the problem.
I don't remember where I was actually going with this train of thought. It's okay. It was a good thing to talk about. Oh, I do. So unlike Outer Wilds, unlike 12 Minutes, right, where I was like, those are based on real time. And then I was saying, I didn't really realize this until I was reading about the game now. Because I didn't like read reviews of it really, because I don't have a PlayStation 5. And so I didn't care that much. But instead of it being time-based, you have infinite amount of time in 4 segments of the day. So the time advances when you go to a different district of the island, right? But you don't have to be like, if I like accidentally press a button wrong and like I miss my timing, I have to start the whole run over because I haven't done it perfectly, right?
Yeah.
You do culminate in having that perfect run where, I mean, this shouldn't be a spoiler, right? It culminates in a perfect run where you kill them all.
Yes.
Right? But it's not based on, I have to have this perfect 15 minutes plotted path.
Yeah.
Which I thought was cool. I was like, that's a cool twist on the time loop genre. I feel like time loop genre has very much been either it's a conceit that we put onto our roguelike, or it's a like aggressively timed thing. I was like, oh, this is an interesting direction for this to go, because obviously time loops are not going anywhere, because everyone has just decided that we have to explain why your character is reborn after dying, I guess.
Yeah.
I think it's so interesting that's so I mean, who knows? Who knows why the time loop game is big, right? But every potential reason for it is like, that's such an interesting psychological thing. But I thought that was a neat gameplay innovation of like, you don't have to, probably feels a lot better for people who are a little more casual.
Yeah. I think it probably brings it a little bit more in line with Arcane's previous games too.
Right.
As opposed to making something entirely different from what they're used to. So it makes sense from that perspective as well.
Definitely. So throughout the game, you're trying to hunt down these other 8 visionaries, but you are also being hunted. And this is the thing that I remember getting like the most coverage in this one game show thing that is stuck in my brain. You're being hunted by Juliana, who is also an assassin, who also seems to be aware of the loop, unlike pretty much everybody else. And she is trying to kill you, presumably because you are trying to break the loop, and she does not want the loop to be broken.
Yes.
So you can have an AI Juliana, or, as they advertised a lot, you can have a real human player jump into your game and play as her and try to mess you up.
Interestingly, I saw people surprised about that when that came out, that they didn't realize that from the marketing, which is really
I really thought that was like central, but I don't know.
They didn't introduce it until like the second or third trailer, I believe. But
okay, fair enough.
But yeah, so it's just like Dark Souls.
Whoa.
You can go invade someone else's game as Juliana and try to sort of mess up whatever they're doing. You can just go after the person playing Colt. You can try to set traps for them. Or Juliana also has an ability where you can like turn into an NPC that isn't her and try to blend in with the crowd and surprise the person. You have to be good at that though, because if someone's like, that AI looks like they're not acting correctly, you could blow your cover really fast. And playing as Juliana also gets you like bonuses in your Colt campaign. So like skills and weapons and stuff, I believe.
Is it possible to play Juliana as a helpful character? Can you let me solo her this game?
I don't know. They definitely have to kill you, I think, before or escape from you. They might just have to escape from you too. I don't know if you can play if you can shoot other NPCs while you're Juliana. I have no idea.
It's a good question. Anyway, those are the things that come to mind for me. But yeah, it's one of these, in this game, despite it not being a literal 12-minute time loop or whatever, you do have to get really familiar with people's routines and where they'll be and how interacting with things affects that. So on one hand, playing as Juliana and like pretending to be an NPC seems like, oh, that would be really hard. On the other hand, since the whole point of the game is you're kind of like memorizing people's paths a little bit, you can apply that knowledge when you're mimicking as well.
Yeah.
That seems awful. This seems like a great replay value thing. I would not want that in my first playthrough. That's just me.
I mean, I'm pretty sure the game makes it so it's not constant. You can also turn it to be just your friends if you want. If you don't want stranger Julianas coming in, if you just want people who are also playing the game on your friends list to be able to do it. So there's some options you can toggle to make it so she's not too obstructive. And of course you can turn it so that it's only AI as well.
So I liked that the game director described this game as inverted Clue, or Cluedo, he called it, because he's European. Where it's like, instead of trying to figure out who killed someone, you're trying to figure out how to kill them all, and with what methods. I was like, that's a pretty good pitch. I thought this game had a lot of Hitman energy. I'm not sure that it ultimately actually does.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's a game about a hitman, but... whereas Hitman has this kind of like wide open sandbox where you can like kill people in like many, many different ways. Deathloop light spoiler here, I guess. Deathloop has a wide open sandbox in terms of sort of how you can get the information you need.
Yeah.
But ultimately, in the end, there is not as much variety as you might expect in how you can succeed in killing all 8 of the visionaries.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting.
I think that was one of the common criticisms I saw, which this game got extremely good reception on release, I feel like I should say. So when I say it was like a common criticism, it was often like a, if I had to say
this would have
something.
been nice.
Yeah. Of, you know, it ends up being pretty linear by the end. There's not a lot of like creative ways to get everyone dead, which I sort of get, you know, like there are like 4 times of day and several different locations, and if you really wanted to commit to like things, everything you do in one time period, like affecting things you do in another time period, it would get extremely complicated.
Yeah.
Really fast in a way that would be even beyond the scope of like a Hitman level.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it's definitely like doing like 3 Hitman levels together affecting each other at least.
Yeah. It's like if you had 3 Hitman levels that all affected each other based on what you did in a different Hitman level. So I see why like the influence is pretty limited. Like there are certain actions you take in certain time periods that affect certain things and other things, but not everything you do affects everything. So I get that, but I do also see like being like, well, this isn't quite, you know, the grand scope that I wanted.
Also, on the scale of Ubisoft to Elden Ring, it definitely leans more on the quite prescriptive objective system side of things, which is an interesting choice. I mean, it's interesting to me that this is definitely a game that feels like it could have been targeted at like people who love Outer Wilds, but instead feels targeted. I mean, not that it's not targeted at them, but instead feels targeted at like a much broader, more casual audience, which makes sense as like a very early PS5 exclusive.
Oh yeah.
But I would not necessarily have guessed that from the marketing.
It does feel a bit I feel like the concept feels a bit trapped by like the AAA formula.
Yeah.
Like it has to be really big, and because it's really big, it means it can't be too complex. But I mean that's just sort of a sacrifice. It is a little hilarious that it is a PS5 exclusive, because at this point I think Microsoft had bought Bethesda like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Which Arcane is owned by Bethesda, so at this point they're releasing their PS5 exclusive as a Xbox game studio.
Maybe when it comes to Xbox, it'll have an exclusive 5th part of the island.
I imagine it'll come to Xbox like at the year mark.
I think it's coming to Game Pass, is what I heard, so you may have to try it.
Well, I mean, it's owned by Xbox, so yes, it will come to Game Pass.
Does literally everything they own come to Game Pass?
Yes, that's the point.
I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if they did anything that, you know, sold on its own before coming to Game Pass anymore.
So far as I know, no.
Interesting.
But to be fair, they haven't actually released a lot of stuff from, like, they bought a lot of companies, and just now are games from those companies coming out.
Right.
So, but most of them seem to be coming to Game Pass on launch, yeah. That's the thing they're selling.
Good for them. Another thing this game got a lot of praise for was its dialogue and, like, the humor of it all. A lot of things that were like, wow, I actually cared about the audio logs.
Mm-hmm.
I have mixed feelings about any game that has people talk to you through the DualShock controller. Just, you know, I can't get Goofy out of my head. I get Donald Duck out of my head. But it's, you know, a good device here, and, you know, we should probably move to talking about the twist, perhaps. But before you figure that out, a lot of charming dialogue, fun stuff, good spy assassins, bantery fun.
It also, the 2 main characters are both black, which is not super common in video games. The director is also black as well. which also
more or less unprecedented.
Yeah. Which is all of those things are not super common in video games. So it's notable in that way as well.
So we've talked about a lot of the things about this game that are fun and that are effective. So spoiler warning now. A lot of reviews are like, don't go into Deathloop spoiled, right? So I think I
saw some reviews saying like, you should just know this from the start because it's better.
I was going to say maybe not this part. I don't think we've spoiled very much of like the gameplay fun stuff, so I don't feel too bad. But we'll talk a little bit about some story elements here that you can discover either a few hours into the game or not until quite close to the end of the game, depending on how you play.
Yeah, I feel like that is a symptom of how you that informs how you react to this, right?
Yeah.
The way the narrative is set up is you have small, like every time you restart, I believe you have a small conversation with Juliana that is like scheduled narrative check-ins, but otherwise it's just based on when you discover things in the world by like looking around. So the way in which you receive information can be pretty drastically different, depending on what you do.
Which is too bad, because you might want to know earlier on that Juliana is not... Well, okay, so sorry. Let me do the setup here. So we didn't talk too much about the actual kind of like setup of what's going on here, because I don't think you figured this out right from the start, and I didn't want to spoil. So you're on this island of Black Reef, which used to be a fishing village, but it had, temporal abnormalities, right? Good sci-fi setup stuff. So it was bought by the Aeon program and a scientist named Igor, who, once they figured out that they can turn this island into this infinite time loop, basically decided to have like this endless party forever, where they can do whatever they want and go as crazy as they want, and everybody forgets everything the next day and it starts over, so it doesn't matter. This is very like middle act of Groundhog Day kind of stuff, right? I just watched Groundhog Day, the musical, not the Bill Murray movie. So I was like, wow, this is exactly what he does in this before he decides to be like, just kidding, I want to die. Yeah. Which I guess is what like Colt is kind of doing. Anyway, so it turns out that eventually Colt and Juliana have become aware of this time loop, right? And that's because Colt is like from the past. I didn't super follow all of this, but that's okay. He somehow got sent to the future by accident, and now he's in this time loop. And that's why he can, like, remember some stuff, I think. As you'll figure out from this, Deathloop, I almost said Groundhog Day, Deathloop, at least in the view of some articles that I read, sets you up to think that there's going to be, like, a good payoff to the mystery of the story. And the payoff maybe leaves you with more questions and not necessarily in a positive way. Mm-hmm. But so we've got Juliana running around, and you eventually, at some point, figure out that Juliana is not like the flirty other spy, other assassin in the like kind of, Mr. and Mrs. Smith kind of way. She's your daughter.
Yeah.
Woo! Why is this the next frontier of dad games?
I don't know. It's very weird, isn't it?
Like, 12 minutes is to be a dad game.
Yeah, I would not call this as egregious as 12 minutes in terms of, like, incest.
Sure, the incest is not as dramatic in this. Although I will say at least 12 minutes, not to give it, like, credit or anything, but at least it knows what it's about. And at least what's going on in 12 minutes is intentional. I don't think the grossness in this is intentional. I think it's just badly done.
Yeah.
Which in some ways is almost worse.
Yeah, I mean, I just, like I said, your perception of the game will sort of change based on when you receive this information. And from there, yeah. Because I mean, it isn't incest, right? It's just bantering, and that's perfectly normal to do with your daughter. But it's comes off a little weird if you go into it like, wow, they got chemistry, and then you're like, whoops.
Well, and there are just a few banter lines here and there that are like, and like it's not like she is shocked.
Yeah.
It's not like 12 minutes where they both just sorry for spoilers for 12 minutes here, folks. Hopefully you've listened to that show. Or just
they don't both know in 12 minutes.
No, they don't know, but they're
both shocked.
Find out and are shocked. Here it's like she knows, and there are just a few lines throughout that are like, what were you trying to accomplish?
Yeah,
with that, that's weird.
It just feels like something that maybe they started the game concepting off, and then it grew past that, but that stayed in the game. Does that sort of make sense? That's sort of how I feel about this, because it just, like, it doesn't make sense to me fully as, like, a
feels very
narrative
Star Wars,
choice.
right? It's like somebody decided partway through that this was going to be the twist. I guess the opposite of what you're saying, but to me it reads as
really?
Like they were like, oh, we're going to have this fun game, we're going to have this fun other person, and, like, fun banter, and then later they were like, wait a minute, a twist. Just like a Luke and Leia thing.
Yeah, no,
I'm sure that's not how games work, but whatever.
It might be. I mean, it just, my speculation of knowing nothing was that they came up with the characters as father and daughter, and then came up with the story and started writing it, and maybe didn't do that very well, but kept that part in.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem is just that it doesn't add much necessarily. Yeah. Like, the story doesn't, like, apparently he's kind of a deadbeat dad who abandoned her and the mom, who is now dead, by the way, so go back and listen to last week's show.
I guess that explains why she's okay murdering him so much, but even then, you could do many reasons.
He doesn't, like, everything I've read is like, well, it just doesn't impact that much, and it's like, he's not very, even though he didn't remember this, he's not very curious about it.
Yeah.
So it's just like it's a weird twist to throw in there for no reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, So in the end, you do break the loop. It's sort of unclear to me why Juliana wants you to stay in the loop, too.
She likes it.
I guess so. It just feels like if you're going to introduce the dad and daughter thing, it has to be profound. What was I saying? I was like, last week, it's like, make the daughter not just like the soft emotional heart. And now that here there is one where she's not like the soft emotional heart, and I'm like, I don't like it. But in the end, you do break the loop, and you have the choice. Well, to break the loop, you have to decide whether to kill her, because she's one of the visionaries as well, and yourself.
Yes.
And so, like, there are a bunch of different endings to the game where either it's, like, you walk away into the future, to everything in between, to, like, you guys teaming up to just murder people.
Yeah.
In the loop. So basically, it's a fun game that at some points seems to have more to the story or more to say than it probably actually does.
Yes.
We'll see if we get it here. This does feel like a clickbait boyfriend kind of game.
I just can't do first-person shooters.
Right. I mean, yeah.
So many games that are first-person shooters that just immediately go off because my brain is not wired for that.
Emma just wants a melee mode.
Even third-person shooters is fine. Just,
Emma just wants to punch.
Seeing through first person, is disorienting for me, who sees through third person to first person all the time.
Yeah, it's tough. So are you ready to mash?
Yep, let's do this mashup.
Okay, so it can't be Worms Armageddon, even though that more or less is the mashup. Like, worms with guns, it's funny. You're trying to kill someone else.
Yeah.
But fine. So that game already exists, can't do that. So it's got to be a game that has a sense of humor. You have to have a gun, I think. Probably the main character should be an unexpected animal. Anything.
Maybe that could be the twist.
That you're a, like,
A worm.
A worm.
Yeah.
That would be weird.
Find out like halfway through. Finally find a mirror.
You know, that would be a fun first-person reveal.
Yeah.
Of, like, everyone else is a human, but you are a raccoon. Not a raccoon.
Yeah.
Raccoon is not weird enough, but, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Okay. I'm interested in that. What's the game like? I mean, I think you have to be in a time loop, too.
Yeah. Maybe it's like a... I got nothing for you.
You've probably chopped that pause down for the edit, but listeners, Emma's out there for like a solid 10 seconds, hand on her chin, then she was like, maybe it's... I was like, here it is. I was really thought it through. And she's got nothing. Okay.
Got nothing.
Okay, let's see. What animal are you gonna be? Maybe the animal is really... Give me a good animal for this.
Platypus.
Why did you choose platypus?
There's the spy platypus.
Is that in something else already?
And Phineas and Ferb.
Okay, you can't be stealing... It can't just be Phineas and Ferb, Emma. It can't be Phineas and Ferb.
I don't want it to be Phineas and Ferb. That's just why I picked the platypus.
Okay. So you're a platypus. I don't know if I'd love that, because platypuses don't have any abilities, like special abilities, but whatever, it's fine.
Wow. Rude to the spy platypus.
Okay.
Okay. Seal.
Okay, yeah. Sure. I don't know how I guess you're a seal in some kind of... You could be in, like, the robot suit, like in...
Yeah, like, you're in a suit. You're like a humanoid animal. You must be. But, yeah.
A ratchet type
I don't really know what a humanoid seal would look like, but let's not worry about that.
Well, that's gonna be the big dramatic reveal. So... Okay, so you're a humanoid seal. You've got a gun.
Yeah.
And you're in a time loop because your habitat is disappearing.
You gotta save the oceans.
Yeah.
There's some, let's go whole environmentalist game. There's some evil, like, oil barons.
Okay.
Who are, like, you know, tonight they're dumping, like, all their, like, excess waste into the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And it will, like, kill your whole home, right?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be surprised that you're a seal, though.
Well, we'll set it up to make it...
Like an island area.
Yeah.
Like, you live on an island, but they're gonna dump all the stuff into your island's ecosystem and everything will die.
It will be surprising. It'll be surprising to them, too. Like, maybe you wear a helmet.
Like an old-timey diver suit.
Yeah, but you have to have a gun arm like Barrett.
Yeah.
Because it's the eco-terrorism game, so...
Yeah.
It's just required.
So you have to go through, like, different puzzles and levels. So that's Metroidvania.
Yeah.
Somehow Metroidvania, in order to stop take the oil barons down for good.
Why are you trapped in a time loop?
The Mother Earth revives you.
Maybe in the end, it's like, I'm trying to think of, like, why is it significant that you're a seal? Like, maybe, like, you're just gonna kill all of humanity.
Where does that come from?
Well, I don't know. I'm just like, why is it a seal, right? Like, what's the big shocking twist? That, like, why does it matter that you're a seal? Like, I need this to be dramatic and not just, like, it takes off the helmet and it's... Like,
isn't that in keeping, sort of, with the Deathloop reveal, though? It just sort of happens.
I want to make a good game, Emma.
What do you mean? You don't need an explanation. You just need the dramatic moment where it's a seal.
Okay. I don't know.
Maybe you were human before, but, like, you were wearing this old-timey diving suit even then. But, like, when the time loop started, like, Mother Earth gave you new powers of, like, sealness. And
Maybe
you don't realize
way...
it's actually changed your being until later.
So here's this would be so stupid, but here it is. So in the end, you discover that the way to kill all of the oil barons, however many we decide there are, is some kind of, I don't know, like environment restoring poison that will only kill the humans. Which, you know, the game makes you think is also going to lead to your death, right? So
I don't love the let's murder all humans
Not
element
all
of the plot,
humans,
if I'm
just
being
all, I just like
perfectly
everyone
honest.
on the island who are the oil barons.
Oh, okay. But not your island.
Well, the way to kill them all is something that's like all the humans in this room are going to die.
Okay.
The animals will be saved. And so you think that that's going to be, you know, that's going to be the end of the game. It's like you're going to martyr yourself, but you're going to save the island, right? And one human life is worth that to take down these 1%er oil barons, right?
Yeah.
But then you wake up at the end, you look down into a puddle of the poison, your helmet has fallen off, and you're a seal.
Yeah.
You've been a seal all along.
That's good. I like that.
Maybe you have like a Dr. Dolittle ability to talk to animals throughout. But it's not a Dr. Dolittle ability, you're just a seal.
That makes sense to me.
Nice. What's the title?
Ocean Revenge.
I was thinking something more like signed, sealed, delivered or something like that. But
that gives away that you're a seal. I was thinking like you can't put seal in the title.
Oh, you're right. Can I put, like, orc in the title?
Orc?
Like, orc? Like a seal?
I don't know where you'd put that, but okay.
Orca Borca.
No, we're not calling it Orca Borca.
Fair enough. Navy SEAL.
Okay.
I think this is pretty good.
We're done.
I don't think the seal reveal at the end is going to work out as well as I want it to, but it's okay.
I think it'll be good. I think it'll work.
Well, listeners, what do you think of our seal reveal? Have you played Earthworm Jim? Did you finish it? No one in the comments on YouTube seemed to have ever finished it. Have you played Deathloop? Did you find the twist effective? Have you played as a lawful good Juliana? Right? Or do you have any other thoughts on this week's show? Well, if you do, you should hit us up on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games in the hat, where Emma's about to pull the games for 2 weeks from now, and read our blog, featuring long-running series Clickbait Boyfriend and Split Screen. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, if you enjoyed the show, you should subscribe. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, anywhere that you can find podcasts, wherever you found the podcast today. You can find Talk This, so be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode on Sundays at noon. Next week, it's Emma's side quest.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it'll be yet.
Something good, no doubt. It's 4th of July weekend again.
Yeah.
You could once again have us be like, America sucks, the episode. Call of Duty, the episode.
I hope no one listening needs a reminder of that, to be honest. Maybe we'll do something not America themed.
Yeah, and we'll be like, French games. Canadian games.
Yeah.
And then in 2 weeks, it's back to the main quest. So what's on the menu, Emma? Earthworms, I hope.
For our old game, we are doing Batman Arkham Asylum.
Nice. Another animal game.
Yes.
Animal protagonist.
And for our new game, we're doing 13 Sentinels, Aegis Rim.
Wow, how hype are you for that?
So hype.
Batman is really the 14th Sentinel, I think.
I think so.
Oh, well, the one thing I forgot for our mashup is that we'll have an exclusive for, like, the PS3, an exclusive level.
Yeah, you're right.
Anyway, sounds like a great show in 2 weeks. Excited for some Batman. I guess I'll have to play 13 Sentinels. That one's long, isn't it?
It's on the Switch.
The Switch. See, eventually I will run out of space on my shared microphone and Switch cartridge. Memory card.
You put your games on the SD card?
I only have one.
My Switch doesn't have an SD card in it.
Well, I am out of space on my Switch.
Why don't you delete some games off of it?
If I delete Animal Crossing, it will mean that I've murdered my villagers. I know that's not how it
you
works.
Just archive,
I know
keep the save data.
I know, but it feels like murder.
Then do one of the other ones.
I don't have that many. Okay, whatever. It doesn't matter. Anyway, I'm going to bicker about my memory card. Listeners, thanks for tuning into the show. We had fun. We hope you did too. Emma, do you want to sign us off?
This week, I hope that the worms are rejuvenated by your life.